Well, hello once again, all my vintage dirt bike off-roaders, and thanks to you all for returning to my classic dirt bike TV channel here on YouTube. Now in this next very short clip we're going to take a look at a quite rare machine that I came across at the 2020 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show. Now this bike wasn't that well known here in the UK at the time, but it was quite a big deal when it was launched in the USA during the late 1980s. So I do hope you'll stick around for the next few minutes as we take a look at Andrew Sharp's 1987 ATK 560. Now ATK Motorcycles was the brainchild of Austrian engineer Horst Leitner, who incorporated his very unique torque reducing chain drive system into almost all of his motorcycle designs, which he initially called the anti-tension Kettenantrieb, or ATK for short, although later this title would then be changed to the A-Track. Now this particular bike is a fantastic example of one of these ATKs, and this bike of Andrew Sharp's is a 1987 four-stroke 560 model, powered of course by that quite intimidating looking Rotax engine. Now ATK also made smaller two-stroke off-roaders, and these were also powered by an Austrian Rotax engine. But these ATKs were designed and built in the USA, and these big thumpers were initially aimed at the big open class formula, which was the elite class of motocross for the late 1980s. Now this bike has the 560 Rotax four-stroke power plant, which has the twin port exhaust header pipes which flow into a single pipe at the rear of the bike. And of course in this shot that you can just see those twin header pipes that flow into the single exhaust tailpipe, which has that super trap tailpipe on the end. Now these super trap parts are very good quality and work very well on these big four-stroke singles. Now as you would expect, back in the day these big ATKs weren't the lightest bikes on the racetrack in the 1980s, but they were still very quick machines nevertheless. But one of the other things about these bikes were that they weren't cheap, and on average these bikes were almost twice the cost of a 500 Japanese machine. Now this bike had the 560 Rotax four-stroke power plant with a rubber belt that ran down the left hand side of the motor here to keep the crank and all the valve gear in sync. Now they also had a substantial plastic fuel tank, and this normally held about enough fuel to keep that thirsty 560 Rotax motor going through even the longest race moto. Now this torque reducing drivetrain system was what actually gave ATK their brand name, where Horst Leitner called it the anti-tension Kettenantrieb. Now on the later ATKs, the rear brake and disc would have been bolted directly onto this primary drive sprocket, although this 1987 bike has the brake fitted to the rear wheel in the conventional fashion. But the chain would run through this idler roller system before going on to the primary drive sprocket. Now Andrew's 560 ATK is fitted with a pair of Dutch White Power 4054 suspension units on the front and a White Power single shock on the rear. Now these were among some of the best suspension systems for 1987, and when you ordered one of these bikes from ATK, they would come with the front and rear suspensions individually sprung and valved for the buyer's weight and specific settings, and this would be done straight from the factory. But one of the other innovations of these ATKs were that they mounted the single rear shock to one side of the swing arm, and this was just so that it was easier to remove in a racing situation. But although this was still quite a heavy machine, it was still a very good bike with that excellent Rotax motor and the superb white power suspension system. Now the following year in 1988, ATK would then launch what they called the 604, which was reputed to be an upgraded version of this Rotax 4-banger engine. Although the word is that this was really just a marketing gimmick, as the new engine still had the basic 560cc displacement of the older machine. Although in 1988 they did fit an electric start to this new bike, which naturally increased the weight further, although many riders were willing to put up with the extra poundage in return for having a bike that they could fire up at the touch of a button. But these big 4-stroke ATKs are maybe not everybody's cup of coffee, because they were of course a 4-stroke and quite heavy to throw around. But many of the smaller capacity 250 Rotax ATKs were much more popular, although these big 4-bangers still sold well enough in the USA. But if you wanted to buy one of these unique bikes in 1987, you had to have a big bag of cash with you, because these weren't cheap, and on average they could reach around the $7,000 price tag for 1987, so they were certainly a bike for the well-heeled, but then again you were getting a decent amount of bang for your bucks. But without doubt these ATKs are very unique motorcycles, and they are not a machine that you come across every day in the racing paddock, so it's thanks to the likes of this Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show that we can all get to take a look at them. So I do hope you've enjoyed this very brief look around Andrew Sharp's 1987 ATK 560. So once again, thanks for taking the time to watch my video content, and we'll continue to check out more of these long lost classics from back in the day when we return to view more examples here on Classic Dirt Bike TV.